Okay, good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing today? Excellent. By the way, I just love what Life Guide did this morning. What a wonderful experiment. I did that with my youth group a couple years ago at this point. It was kind of fun to watch them with that panic look on their face. What do I do with this money I've just got? But it's a good time. Anybody win the game by giving all their money away? All right, good job. So this morning, Life Guide was pretty prepared this morning. They went to the bank and everything. Unfortunately, let's see if this decides to work for me. There we go. Unfortunately, I'm not prepared for class today. I just skipped a slide. As you can see how unprepared I am. I don't have anything to show you today. Sorry, but you woke up and my dog ate my floppy disk. And did anybody ever have a dream where you were not prepared for class? Okay. It could have been that you forgot to put pants on. It could have been that dream where you run around campus trying to find that class that you didn't take all semester and plead with the professor to let you graduate. Did anybody ever have that dream? College students, just wait. It's coming. For me, 2 weeks ago, I woke up in a cold sweat, panicked, scared, that I was standing in front of you and I didn't have a computer and I didn't have a presentation and I didn't have anything to say. And I was a little scared. Wouldn't that be scary? They say public speaking is supposed to be like the thing like next to death that's the scariest for human beings. And to do it in front of your peers and not have anything, it's a good thing I'm standing behind this podium. But really, entrepreneurship is sort of like that, I think. It's sort of doing something when you're not 100% sure that you're ready to do it. In fact, entrepreneurship is very much like faith. Because with entrepreneurship, you're taking a journey, but you really don't know what the destination is going to be when you take that journey. You say yes and you do it, knowing that it's going to be success, but not really knowing what it's going to entail. And so my journey is entrepreneurship. I was going to give a little bit of history behind that and how, there's a difference between entrepreneurs and business professionals, I think. Anybody in here in this room consider themselves an entrepreneur? Okay. Good. How about a business professional? Okay, now there is a little bit of a difference because entrepreneurs usually don't wear what I'm wearing today. I had a little problem getting dressed up. I like wearing jeans, but I said, this is my brand colors. I can wear a suit today. But we're kind of wired a little differently, okay? A little bit crazy, a little bit compulsive, have crazy ideas that may or may not work, but let's try them anyway, okay? So I'm going to give you a little bit of my story. Anybody ever heard any stories about a company called D2 Media that came out of Messiah College, a couple of you guys? So I'm going to kind of go over the history. Hopefully I get it right. By the way, as far back as I can remember, I was an entrepreneur, or at least an inventor. I remember as a kid, I would build things, invent things. In 5th grade, I remember specifically that we had a project. My science teacher did a project that we had to invent something. And I didn't invent one thing, I invented 3 things. I invented the splatter guard for mixers. Okay, now, this wasn't patented at the time. I should have patented it. Okay, I invented the electronic pencil eraser, and I also invented sunglasses with earphones. So I was already thinking ahead to the iPod age, but, that's me. And then in high school, so I went into high school, and one of the classes that had just started in high school was something called Principles of Technology. And we had amazing computers in that class that had 286 processors, and we had some AutoCAD and stuff, and really what it was a new take on metal shop and wood shop, and it was thinking through, brainstorming, coming up with ideas, creating solutions, presenting them, and really that's what I do for a living now anyway. But it was a really great experience, and I remember, we did that, we went to different competitions, and I gave, speeches, communicated, I learned how to public speak there. But my teacher said, you got to go to college. I was thinking about not doing it. He's like, you got to go to college. You got to get the degree. And I'm really glad he did. And so I chose Messiah College, which is a great choice, right? Yeah. Right, okay. College students, it is. Okay, I know it might not seem that way right now, but you'll get through it. Okay. So I went to Messiah College. And when I showed up to college, I was one of those dorky kids that came with their own computer. Now, nowadays, everybody comes with a computer to college, right? I assume. But back then, you didn't. In fact, when you first came in, you had to take a computer literacy course to make sure that you could write your papers on a computer. And so, interesting. So I could keep talking, don't worry. They're just pretty pictures. So I came in and had my computer with me. And I was going to try to find a picture of it, but it would have been way too awesome. But my computer operated, okay, so everybody see it, operated at 120 megahertz, okay? It had 20 megabytes of RAM, okay? Anybody a computer geek in here? Okay, we got some, okay. So this is way back in 1995, a long time ago. And the only person other than myself that had a comparable computer was going to be my future business partner. I didn't know it at the time, and that was Evan Keller, and his computer ran at 160 megahertz. And the reason why I had such a powerful computer and invested all this money into it is because I would run a program called, it probably went to sleep, didn't it? Okay. I ran a computer program called 3D Studio, and 3D Studio did 3D modeling, graphics, animation, that type of thing. It was kind of a hobby of mine, and I invested all this money into this computer. So there I was at college. I was doing graphic design and marketing, not computer science. And while I was there, I was in class with another graphic designer named Eric, and he saw some renderings that I brought in, some photorealistic renderings that I had done. And he said, what'd you do those in? How'd you do that? I said, well, I'm using 3D Studio. And he's like, really? That's amazing, because I used to use that in high school. Can I come over and use your computer? And now Eric was an upperclassman, was an upperclassman. And here I was, a dorky freshman. So I said, of course you could come to my dorm and use my computer. Maybe I'll hang out with some cool kids, you know? So I brought him over, and he was working on some graphics. And what I learned was he was working with a student at the time named Andy Palmer, who was literally working his way through college making web pages. Now, nowadays, that might not sound that crazy, okay? But back then, web pages were just pretty much invented. In fact, in 1995, 94 was when Netscape first came out. And so this is pretty new. And so Eric would come over, make some graphics. Andy would be there, said, that looks good. And eventually, though, Eric got busy. You know, I think he was an upperclassman, so he probably had like a senior art project or something. So he can no longer make web pages. And I said to Andy, you know, I think I could do this. I think I could probably do this. I'm in graphic design. I know computers. I have this awesome computer. Why don't we work together? And so he said, sure. And so as he went door to door, literally knocking on the door, saying, hey, do you have a web page? They would say, what is that? And he would tell them and why they needed it, and we would go and make the web pages. And this carried on through our computer, our college career, working out of a dorm room, literally out of a dorm room. And then when we got to our senior year, I was taking a class. I forget the name of the class. It was taught by Professor Niles Logue. And it was to basically create a business plan and marketing plan and start a business. And I remember Niles, he stood in front of the class, and he kind of got like all fired up. And he said, tell me what it's like. This is one of the first classes. Tell me what it's like. What is the most secure job that you could envision? And a lot of us, you know, college students, you know, we're smart, right? We're 21 or something, seniors in college. We said, well, it's, you know, getting a corporate job at a big company. That's security right there. And he kind of yelled at us. He said, no, that's not right. At any minute, somebody can decide to hand you a pink slip and you're out. He said, the only way that you can be assured of your future is if you run your own business. And I remember that to this day. And so we made this business plan at the time, and I made the business plan for D2 Media. Brian Boo made our pro formas, and from what I can tell, I don't know if anybody knows Brian, but from what I can tell, those pro formas, when we look back at them, were actually pretty accurate, which is surprising. And we did that, and so by the time we were graduating, we had about a dozen clients, and Andy and I kind of looked at each other like, what do we do? Do we quit? Do we get corporate jobs? Or do we make a go of this? And literally, we looked at each other and said, well, we don't have to pay off our student loans for another 6 months. I'm living with my parents. I'm driving my mom's car. I could eat ramen, you know. Let's give it a shot. No, why not, right? And in my own head, I didn't tell Andy this. In my head, I said, well, I'll give it a year. Okay, if I give it a year, if it fails, you know what? I've learned an important lesson. I can put something on my resume. If it succeeds, well, I guess I'll figure out what to do if it works, you know? And it actually worked. So we graduated college on May 15th, 1999. We sat at a lawyer's office in Harrisburg and signed papers to form D2 Media Incorporated. So it was a pretty exciting time. I mean, to come out of college and then realize that you have more work than you can deal with and start hiring your college friends to try to make it happen. One of our first hires was a guy named Mark Kripsick. And then after that, I hired Evan Keller, who is an awesome artist, graphic designer, sculptor, and also Josh Benton. And it turned out that after a while after hiring them, we couldn't pay them. This happens occasionally with entrepreneurs. And so we offered them stock. And that was literally how our partnership was formed. And I'm not going to go into all the details as what happened there because, pretty much I did a lot of the work, but it was a ton of fun. And eventually we merged with another company and formed Culture. And when I left Culture had about 30, almost working on 40 employees. And so that was pretty cool success, I think. I don't know. It took about 12 years to do that. But being an entrepreneur, I'm not incredibly excited about running businesses or being a business professional. I really like the risk and the first moving of an entrepreneur. I just kind of crave it, So eventually that kind of slammed back, and I realized at that moment that I was a serial entrepreneur. It took a little. Now, one of the things that I started to do before this whole story begins is some folks in my church, I go to a church over in Middletown called Fountain of Life, they asked me, could you be the youth director or youth leader? I'd say youth pastor, but I'm not ordained, so I don't say that. But I said, I don't know about these kids, I never dealt with kids before. But I very, tentatively said I would do it, and it's been actually the thing that's kind of changed my life. They'd probably kill me if they knew, but I'm putting up a picture of these crazy kids. Some of my youth group, they went camping with me and let me cook. I don't know what they're thinking, but great kids. But the reason I bring up this is because I tend to get a little preachy, okay? Now, you didn't know that you were coming to church this morning. Did anybody know that? All right, come to church. All right, here we go. A little bit of church here. I can't separate the two, really. I can't say that we're like, a sanctuary at our workplace, and a lot of my coworkers can attest with that, but, it really does guide what I do. So I'm going to read Genesis 22, 1 through 5, because I really think this kind of describes the journey of an entrepreneur. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to Abraham, that's okay. I don't have it memorized though, Dan. Hit the left button. I almost had it. That's okay. Hit the left button. Good idea. No, that's good. That's a good point. We don't want to fall. Don't let the Bible go to sleep. Okay. He said, Abraham. So Abraham said, I'm here. Then God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Okay. I don't know if you ever actually, I tell my youth group, like sometimes we read this stuff and we're like, oh, it's a nice story. But do you ever really think about that? I mean, who here has kids? Who would take their firstborn and do that? That takes faith. That takes sacrifice. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you. Anything look a little strange with that scripture? No. Let's go over what that journey entailed. First of all, Abraham was being personally tested. And I think that's really important for an entrepreneur to kind of be vetted, to make sure all that personal stuff's out of the way. We hear all this news about, people that reach a certain area in their success, and then, some kind of corruption or scandal shows up. God wants to test us first to make sure we have the mettle to do it. And usually it comes in a personal way. But he wants to make sure we're approved. And that's really why this story takes place. He was asked to do the impossible. He was asked to sacrifice something. He was asked to take his son and sacrifice him. And I think that's one of the things that an entrepreneur is sometimes tasked with, is to do the impossible. But he was given a vision. God told him what he needed to do, but he didn't really give him a lot of the steps to do it. Right? He said, this is what it's going to look like, bam. And it was up to Abraham to figure out what to do. So he prepared. He had some preparation. He actually chopped wood and put it on a donkey to take with him. He took 2 servants because he probably figured out he couldn't do this himself. So he was ready to do what God was asking him to do. But he didn't really have the whole plan. This is my favorite part of this verse, is God said, just start heading that way. Just go to the region of Moriah, and as you go, I'll show you where to go. That takes faith, doesn't it? How do you know what steps you're going to take, what you're going to encounter? But one of the other things that happened is the very next day, Abraham set out. He didn't wait. He didn't wait till he was ready. I mean, how do you even get ready for that? He just went right away and left the next morning. And lastly, this is my favorite, is he had a vision for success. He had faith that it was going to be successful, because not only did he say what he was going to do, he said, we will go up there and worship, and then we, plural, will come back to you. See, he had faith that his son wasn't going to end up there. He thought that, even though that's what God was asking him to do, God was going to give him so much more. And so that really is a vision for success in my head, And then if you take a look, obviously, what Abraham did since then, kind of a success story, I think. So let's take a look at my journey moving forward. Hold on, let me think. Yes, okay. So in 2008, God kind of grabbed a hold of me and kind of shook things up a little bit. Since I was a youth leader, I was tasked with making a youth conference at my church. And so, being in web design, graphic design, I made brochures, I made websites, sign up. We had a radio spot. We actually went and interviewed on the radio. And the reason we were doing this youth conference is we had some people coming, missionaries actually coming from Africa. Normally we send people to Africa. In this case, there was a group from Africa, South Africa, that wanted to come and speak to us, which is kind of exciting and backwards, right? And we also had another group coming from Mexico looking to do the same thing. And so I was tasked with getting some youth together so that we had people to talk to, okay? So I did all this stuff. And the day that I get there, nobody showed up. I mean, I wouldn't say nobody, but the typical people showed up, And I was kind of bummed. I was upset. Christy was there, right? Oh, good. That's good. At least she was there. But nobody was there. And so I realized, though, as these men from South Africa and Mexico spoke, that they were actually talking to me. We have this joke in my family where we try to fool somebody into baking their own birthday cake. Happened to my mom more than me. But the funny thing is, I felt like God asked me to bake my own birthday cake. Put all this together, and it's just for an audience of one. So I sat there and I listened, and I was convicted, and I was like, oh man, I got it. And so I followed these groups around as they spoke. And in about a week and a half, I realized that my life was ready for a change. I was talking with one of the women that came up. She was a dancer, and I forget exactly how it transpired, but immediately God put this word in my head, which was drop your nets. And if you know your Bible, there's a specific verse, which is Matthew 4:18 through 20. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon and Peter, and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Is that all I did? No, told you I wasn't prepared. And when they did that, the disciples, what did they do? They immediately dropped their nets and followed him. Okay, similar to the other verse that we read, they did it immediately, and they followed without really knowing where they were going to go. Okay, but for me, that drop your nets word meant 2 things. One, it meant that I was kind of tangled up in the business that I had formed. I was all tangled. So if God had called me to do something, I would not be ready to do it. Right? I wasn't ready to move and go and do what God would say. I was kind of interested in what I was doing. What's interesting about that verse is that it's funny. They say they were working with their nets because they were fishermen. It's sort of like I was doing this because that's what I was always told I was. That was my title. That was my job. So I always was in this. But not only was God calling me to lay that down, but he was also, I took it this way as well, drop your nets. I was a web applications programmer. And so when I hear the word net as a geek, in my head it said stop programming for the web and go start programming mobile. I know that sounds weird. I'm a little poetic, okay? You have to forgive me. But that's what it meant to me. And so I literally, after that, went to my business partners and I said, I need to lay down my partnership. They're like, why? I said, I don't know. I just know I need to do it. I can't, I'm not a managing material. I'm not a business professional. I need to be free to do what God wanted me to. And this freaked people out, okay? Because they said, well, how do we know? You're working on a big project and tomorrow you're going to Africa. How do we know you're not going to leave? I said, I don't know. Sorry. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a couple weeks notice. How about that? So it was a little scary at that time. And I also I stopped making websites and web applications and started developing for the iPhone because I felt that I needed to go mobile. Now the crazy thing is that I didn't leave the company I started because I didn't really have a plan to do anything else, and I loved what I did. I just felt that I needed to be free to get out if I needed to. I didn't know what the plan was that God had for me. So that was in 2008 into 2009. And right after that happened, God tested me. Now, most of us would probably, if you weren't a Christian or didn't look at it this way, would probably say, he had a midlife crisis. I might have. But suffice to say that I went through a couple of personal challenges in my life and struggles. And in the midst of that, I ended up writing poetry. Evidently, I'm a poet. And so I ended up writing a poem a day for a year and wrote a book, basically, 441 poems. And through that process, if you were to read that, first of all, I have to warn you, if you read the book, and I'm not going to sell it to you, it would basically be like walking through my head, okay? A little scary in there, but you can see the struggle between all the things that the world was trying to move me towards and whatnot, and theology. It's really kind of interesting. It's like a conversation, in my head. But it was a test that I went through, and that was 2009. Coming out of 2009. 2010, we had a specific event happen in January. I was an iPhone developer by that point, making iPhone apps. And this particular guy got on stage January 27th, 2010 at the Macworld Expo, and he announced the iPad. You guys all know who that is, right? Okay, good. They have a whole movie about him. So that I saw that on web streaming or whatever. I saw it happening. And literally, that was January 27th, probably early March. I was in a worship team meeting with my church. Christy is our worship leader. She just recently became the worship leader there, I think. And we were having something called circle time. We kind of got the chairs and arranged them in a circle and just talked about what God was doing in our life. And Christy would ask this question. Most of the time, we were all sitting there going, well, let's see, I just got off work. I just ate McDonald's. What is God doing in my life, And so I think we had some discussion over it. And after that time was done, or so we thought, she said, well, we need to get organized here. We need to get some binders and some plastic sleeves and some paper. And if anybody here a musician, I should have asked that. Okay, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. What a lot of musicians will do is they'll get one of those 5-inch D binders and they'll put plastic sleeves and put all their music inside. So that way, if somebody says, "Hey, could you do whatever song?" you pull it out and you play the song, and then you have to. The problem with this is you have to put it all back in the right way, or else you're completely disorganized. Okay, and I know how disorganized I am, and I spent most of my professional career getting rid of paper, computer systems, electronic medical records, whatever. And so I kind of blurted out, just kind of fell out of my mouth, we need an app for that, right? Anybody hear that phrase, there's an app for that? Well, I knew there wasn't an app for this because the iPad was announced, but didn't even sell, wasn't even available for sale yet. And Christy looked at me. Now, she'll tell you to this day that she did not say this, but I have witnesses. But she looked at me and she said, "You can't do that." Well, for an entrepreneur, that's like pouring gasoline on the fire. You told me I can't. I'm going to prove. Oh. So that was sort of like throwing the gauntlet down, right? But that was me. That was my own flesh, my own desires. But I went back into the sound room because at that point I was off. I wasn't on stage. I was trying to take over the sound room at that point. We had a child on the way. It's my wife back there. And just to be clear. And so I went back to the sound room, and God just hit me. I mean, another word came and just smacked me on the head. And that word was simply this. He said, "Use your talents to further my kingdom." Now, it wasn't the word talent like most of us think. Most of us think, we like to play guitar. It's like what we do on the side, or, different hobbies that you might have. That's sort of what you like to do. What God was saying is not talents in that sense, but talents as in what I have given you What are the abilities? What is the thing that you do for a living? What is the thing that you were designed to do? You take that and use it to further my kingdom. And then he gave me the vision, which was not only saving time and stress and all that stuff that goes with organizing paper and trying to get ready on a Sunday morning. We would save maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, because it would be easier to pull songs and do all this stuff. But we could use that and spend that to seek God, to pray, to do what worship leaders probably should do. They need to know the way to get to God if you're going to lead other people, okay? So if you're stressed and yelling at each other and having to transpose music in the morning, well, that just kind of ruins it for you. He said, not only will you do that for your church, but thousands of churches around the world. Churches in China, churches in Yemen, churches where Christianity is a crime. And so that night I went home and started laying down the first lines of code for OnSong. By the way, I'll go over what OnSong is. Anybody hear that? Know what it is? Okay, I'll go over some of that in a little bit. But I started laying down the first lines of code. And at first, I basically, when this all happened, it was about 3 weeks before the iPad actually was available, was going to be shipped. And so I had in my head, the whole minimal viable product notion was I'm going to build something and get it out in 3 weeks and be the first on the App Store. So I sat there and I coded my little heart out overnight, kind of the same things I did in college, staying up all night doing this stuff. And in 3 weeks, I had it almost ready, but I couldn't deploy it. I didn't actually have an iPad. I was writing this all on the computer, never even touching an iPad. So I had ordered one. And I remember it was a Saturday morning, the UPS guy showed up, I ripped open the package, plugged it in, and compiled, and it broke all over the place. So I fixed it and uploaded it to the App Store. So basically it took about 4 weeks, but OnSong was one of the first 2,000 iPad apps available for sale. So it's pretty cool. Now, at the time, version 1.0, it was pretty crappy. Okay, not going to lie. I had people that would email me and they'd say, maybe once a day or more, they would say, oh, that's great and all, but it's kind of slow and it crashes all the time. And boy, it'd be great if it did these 30, 40 things. So I'll make a list. And I just started making a list. And this continued to grow. People began to buy it. By the way, one of the things that I considered OnSong was because of the way it was formed and God kind of hit me with it. I didn't consider it a business. I wasn't trying to do this on the side. I wasn't trying to, moonlight or do anything. I considered it a ministry experiment. So I charged $5 for it. I figured, well, at least there's some money coming in. I can maybe invest that back into this and do some more stuff and help people out. But it started to balloon out of control. So in 2011, my wife was furloughed from her job, and I said, look, honey, you got to come and help me with this. I'm getting emails all day long. Can you just handle emails and respond to people and put them in a list of things I need to do? So we did that, and in 2011, it just kind of kept growing and growing. By 2012, late 2011, early 2012, I realized, look, I either needed to kill it or I needed to leave the business that I was in and start something new. And so in early 2012, my wife didn't have a job. I left my day job. We had just bought a house and brought a girl over from South Africa, and we decided to start a business. And that's kind of risky. I think they say something like, you should only really do 12 or one major life event in a year, and we did like 12. We just had a kid, we moved, we bought a new house, whatever. We're just crazy. I think what else was in there? I don't know. Some other crazy stuff, but we decided to do it. And I'm not going to bore you with all the details of what it's like to work at OnSong all day, but mostly it's listening to customers and putting it on our list and doing more things. But today, this is a picture of our booth with a company called AirTurn at the NAMM show. NAMM is basically the show where all music manufacturers go to show what they're doing. So anything new in the industry goes there. And this is going to be our 4th year going there with a great company called AirTurn. But today, OnSong is a top-rated music app for iPad. Now, what I say by that is, if you look in the top paid music apps for iPad, we're always above the fold. We're always in the top 6. I think most Tuesdays we check, we're number 2. Unless Disney Frozen Karaoke shows up. I slide down a little bit, let it go. I never downloaded that app. But OnSong today, is used by hundreds of thousands of musicians around the world. It's translated into 16 different countries. And one of the things I'm most proud about is when we hear from users in different countries that say, we were going to start our underground church today, but we got word from the American embassy that there was a bomb threat. Maybe we'll do it next Sunday. Because if you think about it, if you're carrying around a binder of worship music in China or the Middle East, you're kind of a target. But if you're carrying around an iPad with world-class security, it's safer. Plus, it's illuminated, so if it's a dark place, you can keep playing. If there's no electricity, you can play. So we're enabling another level of worship around the globe. About 70% of our users are involved in houses of worship. The rest, about 50%, are musicians that play gigs, secular gigs, and so we assume that some people are playing in the bar on Friday and on church on Sunday. So that's pretty cool. And we hear all the time that musicians tell us, they're like, especially when they run into a problem or something happens with their iPad, we get messages all the time, I put my iPad on top of the tour van and it broke. What do I do? What do I do? I can't live without OnSong, they say. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I once had somebody come up to me at NAM and he said, you know what, I got to tell you, there's something really wrong with your program you don't even know about. So what's that? He's like, I can't memorize anything anymore because everything's on there. I can't memorize words. I can't memorize chords. It's right there. I use it. And that is a problem. But people tell us all the time they can't live without OnSong. So what is it? For those of you that don't know, if you're a musician, you have your music, you put it into binders and everything. And this is a picture that somebody sent us. And it's a guitarist between gigs. He has his iPad down there, and he's working on songs. He's pulling in songs that somebody might have requested, and he's getting ready to play it. So it's used for practice, but it's also used for... Oh, how did I go backwards? Oh, that's interesting, Jason. Right mouse click on an Apple mouse that doesn't have a right side. But it organizes music documents for practice and performance. And mostly it replaces binders. So a lot of people tell us, thank goodness for OnSong, I don't have to carry around 30 pounds worth of paper anymore. It's all on a 1-pound device, and I can just show up to the gig, put it on a mic stand, and get ready to go. It gets rid of music stands. It reduces mess and stress. And really the reason why we did this is so that worship leaders particularly can do what they do without all that stuff getting in the way, all that worldly stuff getting in the way. It also has live features like backing tracks. So if you have a church that has one acoustic guitarist that can sing, they can get a backing track, put it on there, hit a play button or push a foot pedal, and start playing along to it. So it allows more worship to happen with fewer resources. It does lyrics projection, stage lighting, confidence monitors, and much more. And much more. We have a list of about 500 to-do items. The point is that the journey isn't over. It's not. We thought we knew where we were going. We had a direction, but we're still not there yet. But I think what we found is that this passion that kind of came from those moments of transition for me, that passion has led to destination. And it will. So if you have a passion, it's going to lead somewhere. You might not know exactly where. You might not know who it's going to involve. In fact, you'll probably look back and be like, wow, that's pretty neat how that worked out. But that's kind of my story. We're still in the midst of it. But what a lot of people, if you read your program, what a lot of people always look at for a business is, well, how's the bottom line going? How's it going over there? We hear of a lot of startups that right out of the gate they're in the red. They owe money. OnSong was built organically, so we've always been in the black. Barely, but we've always been in the black to grow, which is cool. But a lot of people always ask, what is your profit? What is the metric of success that you're using to judge your business? That's really... is that what it comes down to? I once had a professor in college, they said, well, a corporation is there to increase shareholder wealth. That is the goal of a corporation. And even in college, I was like, I don't like that idea. There's got to be something more than just wealth. There's got to be something more than just money. So what is the profit? What is your measure of success? The Bible has a verse in here. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? Soul being that passion, soul being that thing that really wakes you up in the morning and makes you want to go to work. It can't all be about money. The great prophet Jim Carrey, just kidding about that. But Jim Carrey, obviously we know him. He has a quote that I just recently learned about that I think is great. He said, I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer. So here's a guy that basically, I think if I get my history right, he was living in a car, doing comedy, trying to pay for his family's health expenses. Rose to ultimate success in comedy, I think more than anybody's probably ever done. And that's what he has to say, that's not the answer. Being rich and famous isn't the answer. So what I want to charge you with today, I think we're a little ahead of schedule, so we get a little more time to answer this, is what is your profit? It actually kind of creepily goes along with kind of what Life Guy was saying. What is it that you could do with your business? Good job at that, man. But what is it that you can do with what you're doing as a business, your personal life, maybe an idea that you have, that you could benefit the world in a way that's maybe not just financially driven, that makes a difference. With profit, if I didn't get a very good grade in accounting, okay, debits and credits, I'm not sure. There's people in this room that are great at that. That was not my skill set, especially over J-term. But what I learned, though, is that profit is what remains when you take out all the other stuff. What remains? And so I ask you to think for about, 10 minutes. Other than the money that you make, what remains from what you do with your business? What remains from what you do in your occupation? So, go. Okay, so I'd love to hear some of your ideas. So if anybody wants to share, raise your hand.
Abby? Okay.
We talked about changing the word profit to possibly legacy. So what is our legacy? We talked about relationships, children, making a difference through our job or through our, our spouses, our husbands, our wives, our children. We were joking about how sometimes you don't truly get a profit in relationships. For example, your children, you're never going to get monetarily. but the legacy is for future generations. So we got very deep at our table.
Are we going back and forth?
We
We can just keep sharing. I think we'll do that. Any other?
I guess I can sit down here, right? I'm Zach, and just had a recent experience. I recently read a book called The Way of Wealth, which is written by another financial advisor, but he's redefining wealth as something of value. And I've really started to see things I do in life through that lens. And last night, got home, I have a 4.5-year-old and 2.5-year-old. And last night, if you remember, it was cold and rainy, and my wife was spent. We're expecting, so she's just done. And I said, boys, we're going to jump in puddles. And I bundled them up, wool hats, rain pants, coats, ran outside, we jumped in puddles. And I texted my wife a picture of them doing it, and said, this is true wealth. This is something of value. Money is just a piece of paper. What is of true value? And for me right now, it hits on the family aspect, as you mentioned.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, Fred's up.
How's it going? I'm Fred. I didn't speak at our table, so I felt obligated to summarize everything that was said. No, we kind of touched on a few different things, and we had a good mix of people that are both in the corporate environment, some people at Messiah, some people working for the sponsor. So it was good because I think it gave a different level approach to some people who are working with hundreds of people around them to people who are in smaller environments. But I think we talked a lot about relationships being key to maintaining that. And I think comes back to the fact that if we're faithful stewards of what God gives us, responsibility-wise, it's at varying degrees, then ultimately He'll be pleased with our role in whatever business that we're in. So I think that we're touching on, whether it's going to be someone who's in a manager position and his job is to be overseeing a group of people and being in a leadership role, or someone who's, on the daily grind, he's just going to be, has a single task or something. It's just being a faithful servant with what you're given.
Thanks, Fred. How about on this side of the room? Make it easy. Yeah.
Mine's going to be a summary for the table, because there turned out to be a theme that the capital, what I gathered, was just investing in people's lives that God brings to you, and some of them in management roles, and some of them in a Christian environment, and some of them in a non-Christian environment, that they believe that their capital is their ability to influence people's lives and make a difference while they're at work and help them develop and be better people. So that's the theme from our illustrious group here.
Okay.
Ricardo, Heart of Harrisburg Church. I think a lot of time the role of prophet is to make us richer, and we take it so that we can accumulate for ourselves. The purpose of prophet, as you, I think, mentioned, is to find ways to invest. And I think they've said here a couple times, investing in the lives of people. Part of our conversation here was trying to find a balance between the secular and the sacred, where our gifting, regardless of where it is serving, is given by God to us for Himself. And so what needs to happen is that figuring out, how do I take my professional life and allow it to implement or influence the church as a whole. Where we are in our community, Allison Hill, we are seeing our investment in the blight and the broken lives that we see. And we're not seeing the profit yet, but that continued investment, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes the time, and you have to have the willingness and the grind to be able to do that. Abraham had to walk up. He didn't just kind of, okay, well, we're still going to make it easy. He had to walk up to the point and carrying the load of the wood and carrying the burden of knowing, okay, I might have to kill my son. And so it's not an easy travel, but his reward was obedience, and said, okay, I will do what you told me to do in spite of the consequences of that. And so I think our prophet needs to be evaluated in this question, how do I give back to God what He has given to me?
Any more? Okay, we'll turn it back to Jason to wrap up. Thank you all for your comments.
Yeah, that was really great. Thanks. Something, and Ricardo kind of mentioned on it too, and even Life Guide, they said, look, somebody over here, who is that? They said, well, it was easy to give the money away because it wasn't mine, right? And if you think about it, everything is God's anyway. I once had somebody at my workplace when I was going through this transition, this was in the Ant Culture's days, they said, well, wouldn't it be better if you got really rich and then you could help a whole village? Would you rather do that, or would you rather help one person today? And I said, I'd rather help one person, because that shows obedience, right? That does something right away. And so that kind of was where I was at. And again, it kind of comes down to, like, if you wait till you're ready, you might not actually do it. And I know how money works. Sometimes you're like, ooh, I got all that money. I'm not, are you going to do something with it? One of the things, I guess, that is the profit of OnSong is when we first started the company, in our very bylaws, we made a nonprofit, basically. I went backwards again. There we go. We made a nonprofit. Actually, didn't make a nonprofit. We just rolled it into a current nonprofit. But the goal of it was to give 10% of our gross income from Apple at this point, for our gross app income, to benefit, to help worship around the world. And that's tough for a startup, to give 10% right off the top. that's your profit margin right there, to give that right back to God. And we felt, that basically OnSong, the idea, where it was formed, if I take a look at the ownership of OnSong, the idea, it was really God's idea. And I couldn't really put God in a contract. The closest thing I could do was this. And so 10% of our proceeds go as a royalty to a church, and that goes to help worship around the world. And so, when you're at work, I think some people mention, you're working all day long. What can I do in my business? And things get tough. I think we mentioned at our table, we're not necessarily saints when we're at the workplace, okay? But I was having a pretty rough day the one day. And one of our employees, Kendra, who is our support agent, she went to the Philippines on a trip, and it was just awesome because she sent back some pictures, and I just want to show those to you right now, what the OnSong Project did. We were able, through this program, to give out instruments in the Philippines to churches that didn't have even instruments to use to worship. See, in other countries, they don't need iPads. They need equipment that works. I was in Mexico once and playing a drum set that was terrible by American standards. See, Americans, we think we need all the fancy stuff to worship and have church. There, it was a brick, like a cinder block building, and the drum set I was playing had destroyed drum heads. The cymbals were cracked, and while I was playing it, the kick drum just broke. So I was literally kicking the drum while I was playing this, right? And they were probably like, man, that American drummer is terrible. But, when you're able to sow into people's lives, in this case, the group on the left, that was what brought a smile to my face the one day. What he's holding is a microphone. That church had, their microphone broke a year before this happened. And they heard that this group was coming from America. They basically formed a big youth conference that was successful. They had thousands show up. And I forget what we gave out. It was like a dozen guitars and some microphones, but they had so many people they actually had to do a lottery. And this group was praying for a year that God would give them a microphone. And we were able to give them a microphone. And what they're holding is a certificate that says OnSong on it, but the certificate says that this instrument is dedicated to be used for the glory of God, and it's signed. And on the right, that's Kendra with a girl who was wanting to play electric guitar. She won a guitar. And here we have another picture of a group. They got another guitar. The man in the lower right is Spencer. He's from New Jersey. He married a Filipino woman, and they're missionaries over there. So he's sort of our eyes on the ground to let us know what the needs are. And we were able to buy whatever is needed, which is really cool. But kind of taking after the notion that, you should really bless Jerusalem and Judea and then the ends of the earth. We also do some things locally besides just investing in worship teams in the Philippines and Mexico. And here we have a picture. This is Brianna and Latrell. They go to a group that we've formed over in Middletown called Life Sounds. Some of the OnSong project funds went to fix up a building that was donated to us in Middletown for the use as a community center. And what we wanted to do was provide music lessons to kids to kind of get them off the street. A lot of kids, they get off the bus, they don't have parents at home, get into trouble. So we formed a place where we can do music lessons, and it actually started to grow so much, and so many people were coming that weren't even musicians. They started asking, can we do something where we have maybe some pizza and talk about God? They didn't even know the word for it, but they were asking for a youth group. These are kids that don't go to church. And so they also formed a group called Encore, and we've had 40, 50 different kids show up on a Thursday evening to further that. So what we're trying to do with that now, and by the way, I'm busy working, I don't spend enough time on this that I should, but Encore is looking to actually give that group back over to the kids to run, to organize, and kind of make it their own. So all of us older folks want to invest in those kids and allow them to learn what it's like to run a church. And here, one of the things that we found while we were doing some fundraising for the OnSong project in the Philippines is that people that are hungry kind of have a hard time worshiping, So one of the things we did is we bring rice and donate funds to another ministry that we're involved with called Food for Life, so we can feed and educate kids in the Philippines. A lot of these kids, they don't have anything, and so they would end up stealing and then be put on hit lists, basically to be killed, because they don't want all that stealing and crime going on over there. And so the way to fix that and have them so they're not digging in dumps is provide them some food, provide some education, and again, invest in the community. And finally, something that just recently happened that's really cool is we had a group go over out of our church, and they're working on planting churches in the Philippines. And what they said is, we need equipment, so that we can talk and stuff. So Onsong was able to provide a church, I think there's 5 churches, if I'm not mistaken, with microphones and a PA system. And this PA system can be run off a generator. It can be carried. It's mobile, but a lot of these places are actually getting brick and mortar, literally churches, and they could set up this system as a more permanent piece. So finally, the reason why we do what we do, the reason why we're passionate, with Onsong, is we believe that worship has the power to transform communities. You take any community, I think music obviously has the power to transform society. Worship has the ability to bring that positive influence into a community and give them hope and start moving in that direction. And so that's really why we do what we do, and it's what we're passionate about. So thank you. I think we're out of time, officially. Anybody have any questions? No? Wow. I answered all your questions? What's next? Well, it's funny. One of the things I wanted to talk about is it's kind of humorous, but we're currently at version 1.9991. And we need to finish the 1.0 version at some point. We have a 2.0 version coming. We have a lot of people that say, can you do it for Android? Can you do it for Windows? Can you do it for web? Can you do it for whatever else they think of? There's a whole content creation process. There's a whole, being able to take music and get it out to people through a subscription process. So we're excited about what we need to do. It's a little daunting, but we just got to take the first step and see where that goes. Yes.
How do you create space for that kind of creativity and kind of big steps forward while managing the tyranny of the urgent, and supporting things, the users that you have now and that kind of?
Yeah, that's really been the challenge. I think, like in every business that I've been in, we refer to it as changing the tires on the car while the car's moving, and it's almost impossible to do. And so part of it is transferring. Being a tech founder is I'm wearing 1,000 hats, and being able to hire people and get them in the right position so that they can take that on. And so what we're trying to do right now is, first of all, finish a version, even though we know it might not be exactly what everybody wants and needs, and then build up our marketing to promote that so that we can continue that revenue stream coming in so that the tech people can go and move towards other projects. So we already have some projects in place. We have some extra developers, but it's challenging, really, and that's really been the reason we haven't moved forward. We have a lot of people that say, why isn't 2.0 out yet? Well, we're busy with all this stuff, so as a small company, it is challenging. Anyone else? All right, I'll turn it over to Dan. Thank you.
Thank you.